Okay, this weekend we're going to talk about Objective 24, where we look at trading patterns within and among classical civilizations. So key terms you should think about right away are the Silk Road, right? It travels from China, our classical civilization of the Zhao, the Qin, and the Han, to India, where we have the Maurya and the Gupta, through to Europe, where we have Greece and Rome. Okay, and usually the Silk Road is considered kind of ending at the Mediterranean Sea, and as we will talk about today, then trade extends throughout the Mediterranean. So as we can see on this map here, the Silk Road was, again, not just one road. It was many routes that traveled through different regions. Some went north, south, connected to oceans, etc. But for whatever reason and means of convenience, it's called the Silk Road, just one road. So take a moment, you can use page 103 and 109 in your textbook for help, and you're just going to label the following cities on your blank map. Don't connect them, etc. And actually, I should clarify, you're labeling them on the bottom map, the larger one that includes India, China, Africa, and Australia. And I know they won't be perfect because it's hard and it's just a big blank canvas, but do your very best. Notice where the bodies of water are. Try to find India, right, pointing down into the Indian Ocean with that teardrop that is Sri Lanka, etc. Try to find the Mediterranean and go from there. And at this point, I encourage you to pause the PowerPoint while you do that, because we are going to move on. Okay, so first we're going to start by talking about land-based trade, which is the Silk Road, is our key trade route, land-based. And it spreads from China through the Middle East, through northern India, all the way to Constantinople, which at that point was Byzantium, right, to the various ports along the Mediterranean Sea. A couple things to think about and that are important are the different goods that each region specialized in. So China, we should think about silk, porcelain. If you think of fine china, that comes from China. India is really well known for its special gems, as well as its spices, as well as its textiles, especially cotton, and its bright colors of cotton. Okay. The Middle East is known for its woven goods. Think of Persian rugs, or like antique rugs are from the Middle East, as well as some pottery. Okay. One also thing I want to point out is that between each destination, many merchants wouldn't travel the whole Silk Road. They'd only travel a few cities along this map you see here. And each city, a merchant has a good that they are providing, and they want to sell it for a profit, right? So if one merchant travels from Hangzhou to Xi'an, and they want to sell their good for a profit, they sell it to the next merchant, who's going to bring it along to the next city and need to sell it as a profit again. So that means that the price of goods is going to go up as it moves along the Silk Road. So imagine how much silk from China is going to cost once it arrives in, say, Europe or even in India, but more expensive in Europe. And so that's one thing to keep in mind about keep in mind when we think about how specialized goods were or desired, and that price might create a false demand. So continuing with the Silk Road, you should take note of who opened the Silk Road. It was Wu Ti, right? And from the Han Dynasty. And some of the goods being exchanged, take a look at your map, but we can get a whole list. Hopefully you have gems, you have gold, you have iron, you have cotton, pottery, porcelain, silk at the very least, paper, all the new technologies. And the Silk Road traveled from China throughout Asia, through northern India, through the Middle East, until the Mediterranean. once the Silk Road met the Mediterranean, a lot of the trade switched to water-based. The Mediterranean is small enough, with enough islands, that it's easier to navigate than, say, the ocean, and the storms weren't as bad. You're not going to have tsunamis or hurricanes in the Mediterranean. And for that reason, unlike the ocean, the Mediterranean was traveled and traded upon quite frequently. Okay. So there was trade of between North Africa and Greece and Rome. Remember, we talked about North Africa as the breadbasket of Greece and Rome. So North Africa traded wheat and grains in exchange for Roman and Greek olives and grapes. So wine, olive oil, etc., specialty items. And the water-based trade in the Mediterranean connects with the Middle East. And that is how there was contact between Europe, indirect contact between Europe and eventually to China, but also India. And in this way, it was very easy for Europe to contact North Africa or Eastern Europe via water routes. And that's how Rome and Greece had a great deal of contact. Or, for example, Cleopatra, who was in Egypt, made frequent trips to Rome. Other water-based trade was in the Indian Ocean, and we're going to call this part West Indian Ocean. And trade here only happened along the sea routes and the near the shore and with the monsoon winds. So trade between South Asia, which is India, and the Middle East or Eastern Africa. So you read the other night about the Kush and the Aksum empires. They were traders from Eastern Africa. And you should know that they traded goods such as ivory and a little bit of gold, but they're really well known for their ivory. Okay? And most of the trade in West Indian Ocean happened along monsoon winds. So monsoon winds are just very strong winds that are predictable and seasonal. So that would mean all the trade would happen from India to the Middle East and Egypt from October to May. And the other half of the year, most of the trade went the other direction because the ships were not sophisticated enough to carry much perishable food or to sail into the wind. We haven't developed these types of sails yet. And so they are only able to travel with the help of the monsoon winds because it avoids the issue of getting lost. The monsoon winds are predictable and sail in one direction. It also allows the ships to go fast enough that they don't need much food provisions. Okay, so early trade by the ocean only happens with the help of monsoon winds. Then we have the Eastern Indian Ocean, which is between India and Southeast Asia and a little bit of China. So it connects the Pacific Islands, which are on our right-hand side, with China and India. And most of this travel, like I said, is done near land because there's no open seas trade. We don't have ways to keep our goods perishable. Or perishable goods, which means they go bad. So to have food stores, we also don't have excellent navigation. So you need to be able to see land to know where you're going. And here you can I would write down some of the goods, key goods that were traded. So in China, you see porcelain, tea, sugar, silk, precious metals. And China imported spices from India, luxury products, and cloth. Right? For example, India and Bengal, we saw they had cloth, yarn, silk, indigo, pepper. And they imported silver bars from Japan and China. Okay, so take notes of some of those goods. So major trends to look at is that everyone has a specialty. Everyone's good at something. So India and the surrounding areas are really good at producing high quality cotton textiles, especially in bright colors. Right? And China trades more specialty items or like fine goods, including precious metals like gold. So China has porcelain, which are like fine dishes, and gems, and gold. Other major trends is that as trade happens, so does cultural diffusion. And so a few examples that this Prezi would show you are Gangnam Style and how this video from South Korea became a phenomenon in Illinois and the rest of the United States, and how ideas spread. And today we have the internet, and so ideas spread very quickly and easily across oceans, etc. That didn't used to be the case. So there was a lot of cultural diffusion, though, along trade routes. And if you can take a minute to think of some. And hopefully one example you came to is Buddhism, which spread to Southeast Asia and East Asia because of trade along the Silk Road. It spread from India, right? So that was one key example. Other examples are the goods and the values. So valuing gold spread, right? Valuing silk spread, and these fine goods. Other examples that are not cultural diffusion but non-material goods that spread are diseases and new ideas, inventions like how to make paper spread along trade routes. And our last idea is what happens with this cultural diffusion is syncretism. And so syncretism is when you combine two cultures into a kind of a new idea. So an example of this would be if you look at the Buddha in India, he's depicted as a very slender, peaceful, kind of morose or pondering man. And if you look at the Buddha in China, he's very fat and happy, and he's known for his Buddha belly, right? And that's the way Buddhism has been interpreted by each culture because of the cultural differences and where the value comes from. Another example would be Greek and Roman mythology. So like Zeus, for example, in Rome is Jupiter in Greece. Vice versa. And so actually examples today are when the Roman Empire adopted Christianity. December 21st was actually Zeus's birthday. And so that's why they decided to make it Jesus's birthday. And that's why we have Christmas on December 21st. It's not because we did studies and found that that's when Jesus was born. It's because of syncretism, the combination of two different religious ideas. Another example would be the Christmas tree. The idea of this tree to celebrate holidays comes from paganism, which was popular in the Roman Empire at the time. And so when Christianity was adopted, the Christmas tree became a thing. Okay? So the term means combining. And so we'll look at different examples of syncretism, but it's taking two ideas, putting them together, and coming out with a new idea. So go ahead now and on your own, answer questions 1 and 2 at the end of the notes, and we hope you have a great weekend. Thanks.